We're recording now. Today is what? What is today? April 24th, 1998.
Yeah.
Okay. Got a list of questions from my mother. These are kind of genealogy questions. What is your first, or what is your full name?
You mean before I got married?
Yes.
My name was Mary Frances Dehan, Dehan.
Okay. And what's your birthday?
I was born in Moat, County Westmeath, Ireland, August 15, 1907.
Okay. When did you come to America?
I came to America in 1924.
Do you remember what boat it was?
Mauretania.
Mauretania, really? That's a famous boat. Even I've heard of it.
That's all that was here was boats them days.
Yeah.
11 days.
11-day trip?
Mm-hmm.
Did they put you in like steerage or?
There's 3 classes, steerage, second and first. I came steerage.
Did you come with anybody else?
Huh?
Did you come with anybody else?
No, I was alone.
Mm-hmm. How old were you?
So I was 16.
You came alone on an ocean liner when you were 16 years old to a new country.
Into New York.
That took a lot of guts. I mean, that's quite an accomplishment. Who met you in New York?
Who met me? I was coming to Chicago.
All right, so.
I was met in New York by a Father Grogan that met all of the ships coming in from Ireland with immigrants on them. But he went to school with my father. He was born and raised in Ireland. And they corresponded back and forth. So when I landed, when they brought the, I don't know, we came in on a tender. They didn't bring the ship all the way in. But nobody was allowed to go ashore. Nobody, because them days they were picking up girls and everything else. But when I got off the boat, he was meeting me. First he inquired if I was there because he knew I was coming. So anyway, he got in course. We had a great conversation. My father and him grew up together, and I knew all his people over there. In fact, I visited him before I left. And of course I had never seen him. But that's what he had. He had a home in New York for people coming in from Europe. There was nobody meeting them here. And he would take care of them. But he was the only person allowed in on that ship.
So
I don't know how many years that went on. That was his job.
He would meet like lots of people every time a ship pulled in?
Yeah, he was there.
Okay. So then he put you on a train to go to Chicago? Did you go to Chicago?
I stayed. We were leaving right after we went through Ellis Island. We went through Ellis Island, and he was there, and he wanted to know if I wanted to visit him in New York. And of course he knew where I was going, and I got acquainted with a bunch on the boat. So we all got on the train. They took us to the train after they put us through hell. Ellis Island, the worst hell house.
I know, we talked about Ellis Island once.
They tortured you.
Yeah.
What they did to you in Ellis Island, you wouldn't do to a dog.
Yeah.
They were so brutal down there. Of course, they had their own hospital. For if they found a scratch or, something on them.
They sent you back to the boat?
There was a movie some years ago about the 2 sisters
that
came together and one had something wrong with their eyes, and they took her and sent her back.
Wow. But you were fine. They let you in.
There was nothing wrong with me,
Yeah.
health-wise,
Yeah.
at that age.
Because I remember we talked once about Ellis Island being rebuilt
Oh,
and
Ellis
used,
Island.
and I had known, I assumed you'd gone through there, but I didn't know how you felt about it. And I said that I was thinking about contributing to putting a block there with the Barrett family name on it. You told me never to do that.
That was the end of Ellis Island. That closed it shortly after.
Really?
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was run down.
Yeah, it was terrible. But they had their own hospital, and if somebody came in sick, they took them and put them there. But you know, before the ship landed, they had all those doctors out there inspecting the people getting off.
Like for
before the ship
lice
landed.
and disease and.
And you went through there and they checked out your papers. But then when they come in, they had to go through it again.
I heard that they would make you walk up a long flight of stairs and see if you limped or something like that.
Oh no, I forget what they did, but they did. I had a little suitcase with me, a small container with some clothes. Anyway, they lined us up against the wall and they stripped us naked, just imagine.
That's awful.
And we stood there, and we're all a bunch, the bunch with me were from Ireland, they were all young. They took every stitch of clothes off of them and took them in and fumigated them.
Like animals.
And went through your hair with a steel comb. And I had a beautiful head of hair down to the small of my back, auburn. And boy, did they go through my head with that steel comb.
Awful. That's just horrible.
Uh-huh.
What did your father do for a living? And tell me about your life in Ireland before you came here. I mean, your father was a butcher or something, right?
No, my father was a cattle dealer.
He was a cattle dealer.
Yeah, a cattle dealer.
What was his full name? Do you remember?
Huh?
What was his full name?
Peter Deehan.
Peter Deehan.
Yeah.
Okay. And
There was 3 brothers of them.
Yeah.
There was John and Patty and Peter.
Okay.
And my mother's name was Fox. Her maiden name.
Her maiden name was Fox, and her first name was
She was Bridget.
Bridget Fox.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. And my father was 20 years older than my mother. And it was one of those matchmaking things.
Really? So
Yeah.
how does that work? How's the matchmaking?
Well, they don't see them.
Well, so what?
The day they get married.
So it's
That
like
was quite common.
so it's like a catalog bride without the catalog. Like they
No,
were.
no. They only lived 3 miles apart.
Oh, so they were nearby.
Yeah, they knew the family.
So the families knew each other.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they kind of said, well, he should marry her.
They don't. They pick for their people. I mean, you just don't pick up with anybody.
Okay.
And listen, my mother was the youngest of 17.
Wow. Huh.
The youngest of 17, and she lived to be 95. She never shrunk or anything. She was big and you know, strong.
Was she from that
She
part of
was
the?
from- Yeah, she was from a place called Kilfilen. It's about 3 miles out of the town.
What did her family do for a living?
They were farmers.
They're farmers.
Yeah.
Was that part of the reason they have 17 kids, is to help take care of the farm?
They got fed and they were well fed.
Okay. So her name was Fox. And your father was a cattle dealer.
Yes.
My mother, I remember her mentioning something to me about a big scale. Was there a big scale there?
Well, they had a business in the town,
Mm-hmm.
and each brother had his own scale.
Mm-hmm.
I have a picture of it someplace. They wrote a book about it, and somebody gave it to me. It's where they weighed. Everything was down on the streets in them days. They'd come in, there was a place to weigh the oats,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a place to weigh the potatoes, and there was another place there. I think it was, my Uncle Paddy had his scales there. There was 3 of them anyway. There were, you know, the 3. They had the weighing pans on them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they weighed pigs.
Pigs.
And
Yeah.
they built a certain thing where they could go in one way and come out the other way. Because it had to be public.
Mm-hmm. So you couldn't cheat
everything
anybody?
was public.
Yeah.
And they own this. There's one left there. My brother still has his crane, but it hasn't been in use for years.
Is it a historical?
Nobody does that anymore.
Is it a historical landmark kind of a thing, or?
It's nobody's ever. It is. It's like a landmark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's on Main Street, Moat.
You mentioned your brother. Tell me about your family. You had how many brothers?
I had John and Patty.
John and Patty.
Yeah.
And you.
Me and my sister Bride.
And your sister Bride.
And I had sister Alice.
Okay. And what did going through them one at a time? What did they do for a living?
Alice died when she was 14.
Okay. Of.
My brother followed the trade, the cattle.
Okay. So he was a cattleman.
And so did Patty.
Mm-hmm. What did Alice die of?
They went to fairs. They had fairs all the time. And they'd go to the fair early in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
buy whatever they wanted. They dealt in heifers.
Okay. And you say Alice died at 14?
Yeah.
What did she die of?
I don't know. I guess it was the heart. No, they didn't. She was sick for a long time, and they had her all over. Whatever it was, the doctor told them that when she come to a certain age, when she got her period, she'd either get well or she'd go. So she died.
I wonder what kind of disease that was.
I don't know what you'd call it.
Huh. Tell me about, let me think. Why did you come to America? Why did you come here?
I come to my aunt's
But why? Why did you come?
to go to work.
So you came to, that was the reason
There
the
was
Irish,
no work over there.
that was the reason the Irish came here, was because they
Yes.
needed work. They wanted work.
And my sister Bride came here, and they were only getting $5 a week doing housework. You couldn't get a job.
In Ireland.
No, here.
Here.
Here, Ireland, forget it.
Okay.
You get $5 a week. And she stayed here for a while, and when my sister Alice died, my father wrote to her and told her to come home. There's no girl in the house, and
Mm-hmm.
she went home.
So she went back.
She went back. She died in October. She was 86. She was buried the day of Mary Ellen's wedding.
Wow. So you came over here for work. You went to Chicago, and where did you live when you got here?
I lived with my aunt at 4531 North Beacon.
Which aunt?
On the north side,
Which aunt?
North Beacon.
And did you find a job right away?
I sure did. With plenty of jobs. I was here around before Christmas time, and I got a job at Fannie Mae's. They were hiring,
Like.
getting ready for the Christmas, packing candy.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a job there and worked there.
Where was the Fannie Mae factory?
It was downtown,
It was downtown.
yeah. And my uncle he was in the loan business.
Which uncle?
My uncle, my aunt's, it was my uncle.
Okay.
He was married to my aunt.
All right. What was his name?
He was in the loan business, local loan, at 30 North Dearborn.
What was his name?
James D. Lynch.
Okay. And so you lived with your aunt
I lived there, yeah.
for how long?
Not too long. Where did I go after that? Oh, I ate so much candy. Blew up, my face was all broke up.
You couldn't keep that job.
And when they were laying the help off, at Fannie Mae's,
Mm-hmm.
there was a woman there, great big woman. Her name was Miss Archibald. I can still remember. And when they were letting them go, and she'd come over to me, She said, I would like you to stay. You'll have a job here. Well, there was no way that I could stay there and eat myself to death.
Turn that down.
Then I worked at the Boston store for a while.
The Boston store?
Boston store.
What
yeah.
did they sell?
On State Street. That was a big department store.
Oh, it was? I
Yeah.
never heard of it.
I worked, $12 a week. I was a sales girl there.
And did they have departments? Like,
Oh, they had 3 or 4 floors there. It was one of the biggest stores in the loop, the Boston store.
would this have been before the Depression? Was this been in the late 20s?
Yeah.
Did
So then one day I got kind of disgusted with the job, and I thought, well, I'll walk around and see if I can do any better. I walked over to the telephone company. That was 111. I don't know if it's still down there. The big office, 111. Was it Madison? I can't remember the name of the street. So I went in there looking for a job. The nerve. So anyway.
and you found one?
She gave me an application, and I filled it out, and I went, she read it, and she said, you're from Ireland? I said, yes. She said, I would never know it. She was Irish herself, too.
What is that?
American. She said, I would never know it.
How would...
There's a little something in your voice, but she said it's not the, the brogue.
But you didn't try to lose, you didn't try to change the way you were speaking, did you?
Huh?
Did you try to change how your voice sounded?
No, I didn't. No. I never changed the voice. But anyway, for a while, I didn't think I'd get hired because there was a lot of girls I knew, American girls, that went over and didn't get hired. I figured, well, I'm just going to see what it's all about. So she talked to me for quite a while, and she said, you'll be hearing from us.
And you did hear from her?
About 2 days later, she called me on the phone and asked me if I would come in. So I went in. We went to school for 6 weeks.
What job were they training you up to do?
Operator.
Operator? What kind of stuff did they teach you to do as an operator?
Well, they put you in this great big room, and of course it's all cords, and it's mostly timing, how fast or how good your hands are. And it's a kind of a fake thing, but we thought it was real,
Yeah.
That's how they test. They had hundreds of girls there testing them out. And they had 2 different boards. They had the A board and the B board, one on each side of the room. And the A board is the girl that, when it lights up, she picks up the call. And the B board is on the other side, she rings it.
So what do you say, what did they teach you to say when you answer the phone? When the light, what'd you say?
Oh, you said operator.
And then what would they say?
Well, I'll tell you. They give you the number, and half of them you couldn't understand them. But they only gave you so many seconds to pick up a call. They were tough.
So they would call and you'd say operator, and then they would tell you the phone number they wanted.
Yeah.
And it might be 4 digits. How many digits were they using in the late 20s? Was it like right now we're using 7?
Oh, it's a way different. It's not, the system is solved. It was a start very few people had, and they were all A, B, and C. There were first class, second, and third. And they had the nickel, and they had the private. And if they put the nickel in, it was a nickel a call. If you got the release, and you knew when they didn't put it in, you'd say, deposit your nickel, please. Well, half of them would have an excuse, you owe me a call. Well, that didn't go over. You owe me a call. And you had a little pad alongside of it with a pencil, and you wrote down the numbers as they come in, you know.
And then you would dial the number? Or how did you connect the caller to the person they wanted to talk to? Did you plug them into that person?
Plug it in, yeah.
You'd have to
And
plug
the
it
girl
in.
on the other side pick it up. She'd ring it.
Huh. I didn't know that.
Well, that was an odd thing. But everybody was, you know, happy with it. That was all there was. They were just, in other words, starting out.
So you were working at the phone company, and that's how you met. So while you're working at the phone company, you met
My husband.
your husband,
Yeah.
Peter
And he
Stephen.
worked, yeah.
What was his? No, what
Peter,
was?
his name was Peter Francis.
Okay, what was his background from Ireland, and I mean, what did he come here for? Same
Well,
thing.
he came here, he was the oldest of his family.
Mhm.
And he came here when he was 20 years old. He came to an aunt and an uncle that lived lived in Austin. And he got a job with a motor coach,
Mhm.
and he worked there.
Was he a
He
motorman?
was a
or-
driver.
He was a driver.
Yeah,
And back then it was streetcars.
yeah. Then he went to the streetcars.
Did he have any particular route, and did they have regular routes that they would work?
Oh yeah, they had different, and out of different barns, and different hours.
So did he have his own street route? I mean, did he go up and down Central Avenue or something like that?
Yes, he worked Central. I don't think, he was mostly on Austin Boulevard. Central Avenue came later. There was no buses on Central. And he'd go downtown over to Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd go down into the loop with the double-deck bus.
Okay. So, how did you meet him?
How did I meet him?
Yeah.
I met him through a boyfriend of his. He was a laundryman. And he come over, they used to pick up the laundry. He picked the laundry where I was staying. And he was a neighbor of his. So he got talking to me one day when he come up. He only come to the back door and you handed him out the laundry. And he discovered, you know, that I was Irish and he was Irish too. So he said, "Do you have a boyfriend?" Oh, I said, "No, I don't have a boyfriend." He said, "I'm going to get you one." I got a friend. And he said, my girlfriend and him, he just bought a new car. And he said, "We're going to come over and pick you up." So anyway, the party I was staying with at that time, he was a policeman. And he said, "Well, there's nobody coming up here and taking her out unless I see them." And he said, "If I'll give him the once over and talk to him, see if he's okay." So that was it. I went out with him for 5 years.
What was a usual date? What kind of things you do on a date?
The dates were nothing. Nobody had any money. And there wasn't many theaters. They had a car. You'd go out and ride around and sit and park and talk, and that was about it. There was maybe there was Irish affairs, you know, like footballs and dances and stuff like that, but there wasn't. And the parks were all quite busy with young people.
Did you?
Garfield Park and places.
So you
boating. And then they had this bicycle riding. You rented a bike. And that was really it.
So you had a particular park or a couple of parks that you used to go to more than any others? Like you mentioned Garfield.
Yeah. Garfield Park was beautiful at that time. You know. And there was up on the north side, Lincoln Park, I think it was. The parks were beautiful. There was no color, everything was clean.
It sounds like you mentioned that the guy who was the laundry delivery person, He says he's Irish and you're Irish. It seems like everyone kind of stuck with their own group.
Everybody clung to their own, then you talked.
So you didn't have a lot of interaction with Italians or Polish, or you pretty much, if you're Irish, you hung out with the Irish.
Yeah, that's right. They all went to the dances. They all hung out together.
Did you, when did you get radio? I mean, did you have a radio in the house?
There was no radios then. There was no telephones. Most of the places didn't have electric light. They had gas fixtures.
Let me change tapes here. This is going very well. I thought I bought a 2-hour tape. Instead, I bought a 30-minute tape. So I'm going to put this other new tape in here. If I can get the thing to stop. Okay, so
And my uncle took me down. He was going to open up his office at that time. I'd ride down with him in the morning because I didn't know where I was going. You get lost.
What year are we talking about? You're working at the Boston store, and we're talking about, what, 1925, 26, that area?
I got married in 1930. In between, I worked for the telephone company. I worked with the Boston store. I worked at Fannie Mae's.
So you went Fannie Mae, the Boston store, the phone company. And you met your husband while you were working at Boston's.
Well, I was with the telephone.
When you were in the telephone company,
Yeah.
okay. So, do you remember when the Great Depression, when the stock market crashed?
I remember everything.
And how did that affect you personally?
No work.
So a lot of people were thrown out of work?
Well, all the big outfits, all the big owners of those stores, they jumped out of their windows. It was not the only suicide. They were all committing suicide. They went overnight. That's what people watch the stock market today. You can be a millionaire and you can be broke the next day. And you got all those people working for you and you can't pay them. They got to pay car fare to get back and forth to work. And there's no money.
Let me set this up. Okay. Okay, so you met you met your husband, or your husband to be. Your dates were you went to parks and you went to Irish dances.
Yeah, mostly Irish dances. And the parks on Sunday.
Okay. And how did he propose to you?
He didn't.
How did it end up? Was it understanding you were going to get married? Or?
No, I went with him for 5 years and I was no more interested in getting married than the man in the moon. He was 5 years older than he was 28 years and I was 23. And I didn't seem to get away. Every place I'd go, he was there. I go to the dances with my girlfriend, and when it come time to come home, he was always standing at the door. Because he'd go home from work and go to bed, then wake up later and figure I was at the dance, and he'd come down and pick me up.
So you got married in 1930, did you say?
1930, right in the midst of the Depression. Started in 1929.
Who was in the wedding party?
My sister and my husband's brother. Just the two.
And what was his name?
Huh?
What was his name? Your husband's brother's name?
Johnny.
Johnny?
Johnny Barrett, yeah.
Okay.
And my sister's name was Brian.
What did Johnny Barrett do for a living?
Johnny worked for the L.
I remember that.
The L station.
And he worked for the CTA as well for his whole career?
My husband worked for CTA.
Is that what, did Uncle John do the same thing?
Then he got Johnny in with they're all one, you know.
Okay.
Johnny worked with, at the L station.
So your husband helped Irish people get jobs with,
Well, there was no jobs.
Mhm.
You had to know somebody.
yeah.
There was no jobs.
Did he know anybody to get into the CTA?
His uncle worked for CTA.
His uncle worked for him?
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
how he got in? Okay. Um, so your husband worked for the CTA, or whatever the name of the company was before it was called CTA.
Motor coach.
The motor
Chicago
coach,
motor
yes.
coach.
And
He's a
Chicago.
driver.
And at that time, you were working at the phone company.
Yeah.
And you were living where when you got married?
I was living on Latrobe Avenue, 1611 North Latrobe. It's on North Avenue.
Okay. And
And we got married over at St. Thomas Aquinas Church
at St.
on
Thomas.
Austin Boulevard.
And then
And there was 7 weddings the day we got married.
so
And the priest interviewed us, you know,
Yeah.
great big guy. He was French. And he said, he interviewed me first, private interview. Found out all about you, and of course, naturally, you weren't married, you were 16 or 17. And he said, your day of birth. I said, August the 15th, 1907. Well, that was a holy day. And that's how I got my name of Mary. So anyway, my husband comes along. His birthday is Christmas Day, the 25th of December, 1902. So when we got together afterward and he laughed, the priest said, well, I'll tell you, I have married a lot of people, but never with this special day, one Christmas and one born on the 15th of August.
What was the priest's name? Do you remember? The French priest? The guy who interviewed you, do you remember his name anymore?
The priest's name?
Yeah, the priest who, you say
Mary?
there, yeah, well, you say there was a priest.
Dononville, he was French.
Okay, Dononville?
Dononville, I was long dead.
Yeah. Well, I was just wondering if they actually.
No,
if you-
Dononville, I was a great big man.
I was just wondering if you actually wrote down your answers somewhere
No,
that
no,
could be
no.
found.
I can remember his name, Dononville.
Yeah. At St. Thomas Aquinas.
That's it. And there were 7 weddings that day.
So they didn't want you to fool around too long in the church.
It was funny, and you know, people didn't have money, and they didn't have no big crowd, they didn't have bridesmaids, they were all people that just, maybe the 2 people, and maybe they had a witness, which they had to have. Not when he interviewed them, no, but when they got married.
So.
And they didn't dress up with all of those gowns, and there was nothing.
Yeah. Well, now you can see people spending $10,000 on a wedding.
Oh my God, they're 20 and 25,000 for just a small wedding.
Yeah.
So that was that.
So
Then,
he's working for Chicago Motor Coach. You're living on Latrobe. You're working for the phone company as an operator.
yeah,
Then my father was born in 1931. Am I right about that? Or Mary Jane was.
1931,
Yeah.
July 2nd.
Right.
And Mary Jane was born September 2nd, 1932.
And did you move after they were born? I mean, when did you move to Ohio Street?
We moved, we had an apartment. My husband lost his job. They were out of work, so we moved. We were in an apartment on Ohio Street, 1 bedroom, 2 kids. And everybody was out of work. Johnny was staying with us. His sister Annie, she was doing housework in Oak Park for $5. and my sister Bride was doing housework for $5, and they almost starved them. When they left there on Thursday, they got Thursday off. They were so hungry they used up the $5 to eat.
So
And they'd come and stay with us.
So you had a 1-bedroom apartment.
1-bedroom apartment.
How many people are in it?
Well,
Everybody you
when
just
they'd come when they were out of work, them days they had a big dining room with a Murphy Inador bed, which was the greatest thing that was ever invented. It was a great one wall, and it was like a clothes closet. When you opened the door, you pulled this bed down. It was a full-size bed, and you pushed the dining room table out of the way, and that's where they slept. And there was a couch.
So you pretty much everywhere was people were sleeping.
Any place that was sleeping.
How'd your husband lose his job? Just because of the depression?
Strike.
There was a strike, and he went out on strike.
He went out on strike,
Against
and they
Chicago?
never took them back.
They never took him back.
No.
So what did he do for a living after that?
He went in the saloon business.
Where was the saloon located?
5847 West North Avenue.
What motivated him to go into the saloon business?
He couldn't get a job. There was nothing to do. He tried all over, walked night and day. They had holes in their shoes from walking, and there was no work. So anyway, there was quite a few. Well, they had a lot of friends, and they all talked about the liquor was just coming back then. The country was dry.
So prohibition was ending?
Prohibition, yes. And they were opening up taverns. So anyway, somebody talked him into it. I was very much against it. They said, I have to try something. And he had to have $1,000. I don't know how he managed about the $1,000.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
So much a month.
So
The license was $1,000. The rent was high. And you had to, the dram shop, that's that insurance, if somebody comes in, and gets hurt, they sue you. You had to have all those things. The store rent, the dram shop, the liquor license, and everything was really, and the business, beer was a nickel a glass. See how you could make any money?
You could get in trouble with beer, nickel a glass.
5 cents a glass.
So how long did he run the saloon?
10 years.
From when to when, you think? From like
And I helped him.
1933 or so, or
Yeah.
what? Do you remember what year he started the bar?
I think he sold at about 44, 45.
Okay.
45.
And
And I used to go up there and put in my 8 or 10 hours. I'd go when he was home, so the kids weren't alone. They were going to school.
so if he was there, you were at home, and if he was at home, you were there.
Yeah, there was always somebody at home.
Did you have other family members working there?
Huh?
Did any other family? Did any relatives work in the saloon?
No.
No.
There was no money in it to pay anybody.
Yeah. So the only
You
employees,
worked 7 days a week.
just you and Grandpa were the only employees?
Yeah, we once in a while. He used to once in a while if he wanted to go down for the bowling or something when I'd come home and see that everything was okay. We always had somebody stay with the kids. They'd call me up and I'd have to go up and let them go. They they used to go out to where the horses, the racing. There's quite a few people came in there, men that, used to go to those places. So that way he got away. And I'd take over. I'd come back up and work for a couple of hours so they could go.
So that's what he did for relaxation. He'd go to horse races.
Not much, but they did. They went out to the track, or to a football game, or whatever was He didn't go very far.
When I think of him, I just think of working and working and sleeping, eating, and then going back to work.
No, he could, he always depended on me. I'd go up and work there, and he was home, got the kids out to school, and fixed their lunch for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time they come home, I was home. He was up there. We had a colored guy that used to come in and clean the place every morning. He'd mop it and clean everything.
So if
There was nothing doing all day long. Nobody had come in, and people had no money.
Mm-hmm.
All you got was a lot of conversation. It was a place for them to come.
So it's all right. There's a lot of people, but not a lot of money being exchanging hands. Yeah.
Nobody had any money.
Was there
They weren't working.
was there saloons in the neighborhood?
There was, there was quite a few of them.
So why would you pick one saloon over another?
Well, the store, he knew that neighborhood, and there was quite a few men that worked for CTA that he knew, and for the motor coach. And they used to come, and visit and
Mm-hmm.
bring their families. It was a family place.
Mm-hmm. Did you have to, was there any, did you have to pay the police to watch out for the place, or the Italians or something like
The
that?
police kept an eye on, they were Austin District,
Mm-hmm.
and they would drive by.
Mm-hmm.
If there was any complaints, they'd be right over.
Mm-hmm.
But them days, there was nothing, it was a family neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And there'd be women go shopping in the afternoon, and they'd bring the kids in and leave them to me, and they'd sit, till come back. I'd give them a bowl of popcorn or a bowl of pretzels, and they had a great time.
So
We were in St. Angela's Parish.
there's no real crime around there.
Uh-huh.
No real crime, and you had no real
No.
problems with
No,
people, or
there was no. There was nothing. People were, well, look how long ago it is.
because nowadays you'd have to have all kind of security and
No, I wouldn't have that business. I was very much against that business. He lost his health there too. He got nervous and jittery, and you hate to see people drink, and they'll come in drunk from someplace else and give you a lot of trouble.
So was he the person who would control the drunks?
He tried to console them. Some of them lived across the street,
Did he get into
And I take the apron off and take them across the street. He was afraid they'd get ran over.
So did he get in? Did he ever get into fights, or did he get hurt or anything like that? Or
Oh, if they got hurt, you'd get sued.
so he might have drunks in there, but he didn't have real altercations, or nobody was really hurt.
No. And the kids in the neighborhood, they used to come in with their parents. And sometimes I'd have them to be all looking in to see if I was there. And they'd come in, then I'd call their parents and tell them that they were there, that they'd have to, take them across the street because it was dangerous.
Mm-hmm. At this time, you did not own a car? You didn't own a car at that time, did you?
Had a car?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a car.
Now, you say he got laid off from Chicago Motor, he was in a strike at the Chicago Motor Coach. They did not hire the strikers back.
No.
They just hired replacement workers to come in there.
Strike breakers.
Did they then, you say, but he went back to
We went back to the CTA.
when they were hiring years later.
Yeah. CTA, two different outfits.
Yeah.
Two different outfits.
He went back there just because it was a better way of life, regular paycheck, not as much work.
It was a job. They didn't make a big salary. It was a job.
Do you remember how much money it was? How much money was it? Do you remember?
At that time, it was 75 cents an hour. And you had to have $25 of your own money in your changer. You had to supply your uniform. And it wasn't cheap. And you wore a certain shirt, a blue shirt, and there was only one place, it was a uniform shirt, that you bought them. And you'd have 2 or 3 of them, and I'd do them up, wash them at home and iron them, and you'd wear them. Then in the summer they had to have a different outfit. They had to have a cap that had the holes, you know, in it for the air. In the winter they had a different one. But it was mostly Irish that worked at that job.
And he had to have his own change? He had to have $25 in his own change?
You have to make change for the people that got on.
Yeah. So it was $25 of your own money?
Your own money.
And that's how they made sure that you paid attention to how much change you were giving to people.
And the people that get on, they wouldn't have the right. Today they have to have the right change.
Right.
For a pass. But they get on, and he said sometimes he'd have 10 or 12 people get on and almost clean them out of change. And you had to go to the bank and buy it.
Do you remember any stories from back then when he was driving the buses and the streetcars of, you know, any particular things happening to him? Like, I remember him telling me stories about, telling people to quiet down, or, you know, running over a dog, you know, that kind of stuff.
There's all kinds of them. And he was a supervisor downtown with the motor coach with the double decks. He was always, they had 2 times they went to work. They went in the morning while it was busy, and then they come home. They were home all afternoon, and they went back. It was a shift. They went back when it was busy in the evening and got the people on. So in between they didn't need them.
So what did he do, go home and take a nap?
I went downtown one, I was single yet, and he called me up. He said, take a ride down and meet me. And I took a ride down, and he was busy, very conscientious, loading up the buses. And he said, he got one bus loaded up, and he sees the stuff running down, the water running down from the 2nd floor. Somebody went up there and peed up there.
I'm sure he wasn't happy about that.
Oh, no.
And he worked a split shift. He'd work mornings.
Yeah, he worked mornings. That's what they call the splits.
And then he would take a nap or something.
He'd go out about 5 o'clock in the morning, and he got down to the barn and pick up his bus. And then when the rush was over, when the people got to work, when the rush was over, he took the bus back to the barn. Then he went back in the evening and picked it up again. They put in their 8 or 9 hours.
What did he do between the shifts?
He'd come home and rest. Her nerves were shot too. It was you got all kinds of people riding.
His nerves were shot just from the stress?
Well, nervousness, you know, and you're driving one of those big buses, and you got people falling on and off.
Did he have any health problems in general? I mean, like they were hereditary?
Health problem?
Yeah, I mean, did he have any?
Oh, he had, yes, he had that colostomy. And he was laid up for almost 6 months.
And that was caused by
that's
tumors in
the
the
condition, and it's everything else. And of course, he was quite heavy.
How heavy and how tall?
Well, he wasn't. I'd say he was about 5'8", and over 200 pounds. We never bothered about weight that time. He'd come home and lie down for a couple of hours, and he'd get up and go back again. Then he'd come in the evening, and As a rule, he'd stop and have a few drinks on the way home, come home and eat, and go to bed. He wasn't a drinker, he wasn't a smoker, but
But he had.
he'd have a few beers.
Did he have any problems with? I mean, obviously, what killed him was a heart problem, right? Did he have? He had a coronary, right?
He had, what killed him was arterial cirrhosis. The arteries
Were blocked.
plugged.
Yeah.
And at that time, there was nothing. When he died in '66, they were dropping off. They didn't know anything about it.
Or cholesterol or any of that
Well,
stuff.
I guess it's cholesterol.
Well, cholesterol is what causes the blockage, I guess.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. And he went out that morning and worked, and no complaints, no nothing. And he come home on his swing. I talked to a woman down the street. She come over that afternoon, she couldn't believe it, and rang the doorbell, and she said, "Something happened to your husband?" She said, "You know, I waved to him and talked to him across the street when he was going home." She said, "I take a lease of his life." He was so, and she said, I said, "The weather's getting nice." It was April, it was really nice. And she said, yes, she was an older person, much older. And when he was coming up the stairs, he met the mailman. He was bringing the mail. It was about 10 o'clock. And the mailman and him had a few words. The mailman said, "This is great weather." He said, "It is good for both you and I." And that was that. The mailman couldn't believe it.
Couldn't believe what?
That he had died.
Oh. Because he seemed fine.
Couldn't believe it.
Well, did he have any plans for retirement? Had you had a chance to talk to him about what you might do when he retired?
The last, because he didn't live to retire, about a month or so before, he said, "I've gone through a hard winter," which was hard, cold, the winters were cold. And he said, "I'll get what I can and retire." And he was only 62. And he said, "Then we'll go with the weather. Wherever the weather is nice, we'll go there."
So he was thinking Florida or somewhere much warmer.
Oh, I'd go down to Florida or I'd go someplace to get around. And the weather was so bad in Chicago. You were freezing. They couldn't even, they're trying to make change in that. Their hands were frozen.
Right. The doors are open all the time. I imagine that'd be really tough on your health.
It was tough.
So no, back to this illness. No serious illness ran in the Barrett family, or the Dean family for that matter, like cancer or.
In my family?
Yeah.
No.
No real serious.
No. My father died at the age of 78 of a ruptured appendix.
Oh, something.
Gangrene had set in.
Something preventable.
And my brother John and him were up in Dublin at a fair the evening before, and he complained, and somebody said, he never drank whiskey, "Why don't you go in and get a good shot of brandy, it'll maybe help that pain." So anyway, he did, and he come home, and he didn't say nothing when he come home. So my mother said the next day, my brother and him were going to the bog, that's where they cut turf. And so he went, he didn't say nothing. So when he got out to where they were working, he said to my brother, "I'm sick," so he took him home. And our bedrooms were upstairs, so my mother called the doctor right away, and he came over. And he said, he looked at him. He said, "I can't do nothing."
Why?
He walked out the door and he said, "I'll be back in 10 minutes. I'll come back," he was dead.
Boy. And that was so preventable,
The gangrene killed him, went right through his system. Otherwise, he would live to be, you know, maybe 80 or 90.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was wiry, he was thin, and
Mm-hmm.
quite active. But that's how fast he went.
So, as far as you know, the Dean family, they don't have any cancer or
No,
leukemia or anything
no,
like that,
no.
and the Barretts, as far as we know, that's they coronary disease, I guess, would be.
Well,
Like, what did Uncle John die of?
Uncle John died. He was eating lunch, they were getting ready to move, and he went right off the chair. Not a word spoken. And he hadn't been sick either. It was the heart.
Mm-hmm. How old was he?
How old was he?
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't retiring age either.
Jeez.
His one of the kids called me up and was on a Sunday, and he's Jackie. He said, "Aunt Mary, I got bad news." I said, "What?" He said, "Dad just dropped dead, fell off the chair. We were eating lunch, getting ready, so we're moving." And I said, God, I knew his mother had been sick for years, but he was the last one.
Mm-hmm.
Not a word spoken, right like that.
Any other Barretts that you know of that died of coronary disease? Sounds like the men have a problem.
No, the last two just died, the two brothers at home. And they were in their 80s.
So they lived to be pretty old.
89,
Yeah.
85, they lived. And the Uncle Frank lived to be a good age too. I think he was 89.
But he didn't die of heart disease.
No, he died of old age,
Right. Right.
like me.
Well, he's about your age. He's the age you are now. Was he like, what was he, 89, did you say?
I think he was 89.
Because I remember him.
Yeah, he was a big man.
Mm-hmm.
He went blind, and he was laid up. He was a big man.
I'm looking at some of my notes of things I hadn't talked about yet. I remember hearing a story of my grandfather, your husband, hearing the Lusitania sink. The Lusitania was torpedoed off the coast of Ireland in 1916. And I remember he told me, or you told me, or my dad told me that he heard that happen.
Oh, the Titanic?
Yeah.
He heard the screams of when the Titanic hits, because they're on the coastline.
Right.
There. He said he never in his life screamed, people screaming and yelling.
Oh man.
That was the night the Titanic.
So
Did you see that?
Yes, it did.
I didn't. I don't care to see those things because I've been across that ocean 4 times. I don't care for it.
Yeah, I've seen it twice. It was very
But
good.
it happened 85 years ago.
Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to, I've gone through most of my mother's kind of factual stuff. Now you lived on Ohio. What was the address of that house on Ohio?
5002 West Ohio.
5002 West Ohio. And when you bought the house,
We bought that house for $4,000.
Okay.
We we were living by Aunt Molly on Congress Street, 3521 Congress, the way down.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that neighborhood was getting bad, very bad.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids were getting just about ready for school. So we had to have a place near the school. So we got out and we knew this guy. He used to take the rental up at the tavern, you know. He'd come in and pick it up once a month, and he was in the real estate business. So I talked to him one day and he said, "I have a nice house." He said, "and it will be near the school and near everything." He was Catholic. And he said, "Why don't you go out and look at it? It's $4,000. And it had the basement,
Mm-hmm.
and we had the 6 rooms, and there's a 5-room attic upstairs.
A 5-room attic, really.
5 rooms, a full attic. People that when we moved in there, the people lived there, they've been living there for years, and were from Sweden. But anyway, we bought it for ourselves, you know, there wasn't that much money in it to begin with. To rent, they paid $19 a month for 5 rooms.
Boy.
And the basement rented for 12, 4 rooms.
So were they both occupied when you bought the house?
Yeah.
So that helped with the house payments?
Yeah.
And you had a barn in the back?
The guy would come that had a mortgage on it, he'd come once a month. Well, no, he didn't come once a month. I think he came about every 6 months. He had some kind of a mortgage, $50 we used to. Well, we paid $50 a month and it was paid off. So, but we spent about $17,000 on it. With everything new there. New windows, new porches, new bathrooms, new plumbing.
It was an older house?
It was, and a new 2-car garage.
Yeah.
And all I got out of it was 17.
Well, that's
the niggers were knocking on the doors around there. And your grandfather said to me before he died, he said, this house is paid for. He said, live here alone, don't have anybody. Don't be bothered with tenants, fighting, and you know, noise all night long. He said, the place is paid for, you can afford to live in it.
You don't need the irritation.
Be alone.
Yeah.
And the jigaboos moved in, that was it.
And that's what happened to your property value. That's why you didn't get anything for the house.
Yeah, well, anyway, people were selling, fights were going out of there like mad. Couldn't go out in the street, you couldn't go shop. And once they took over, that was it.
And you moved out of there in what, 1968? Something like that?
Yeah. Well, I lived there 7 years after my husband died, and I worked over at Simpson's.
Simpson's Electric?
Simpson's Electric. I worked there every day. So then we put the house for sale. We had an awful time. They wanted me to take down the attic. The building people were, well, it was City Hall, it was a bunch of crooks. And they were coming out inspecting and saying that the attic was built later. Well, nothing was built later. Everything was there when we went in there, and people living there. And there was a front and back entrance. Anyway, they took me into court 5 times. And I fought it all the way through. One guy come out one day, we're going to knock the attic down over my dead body. I said, you're not knocking anything down here. So anyway, I'm back into court again. There were all the, and you had to go. Subpoena, you went. And I had the poor old soul upstairs, Mrs. Montford, all alone. And she'd been there, well, she was there about 10 years when we bought the place. And she was crying and won't have a home. And I dragged her down one day, down to the court. And I come before the same judge. I was worn out, but I had that going, and I was young at the time. I'm going to show those so-and-sos they're not going to come in here and move anything, because this house is as it was, built. So anyway, I had to get a hold of the owner, the original owner. His name was Olson. And I asked him about the house. He said, no, that was there, it was built like that.
When was the house built?
So anyway, I said, they want me to take the attic. I said, no, that's, we got the papers.
Good.
And I had the papers on the whole thing. I had the basement done over. And they wanted to tell me it was drywall. And I had the papers from the plasterer that plastered every wall in that place. Your grandfather was alive at the time.
Yeah.
And he watched them, and they plastered the whole place. So when I went out to court the last time, the judge looked at me and he said, are you in the building business? I said, no. And he said, you seem to know a lot about it. I said, I do. And he stamped the thing and he said,
That's great. So you ended up selling that house and made 17. Got 17,000 for that.
We paid for it.
Yeah.
But as I say, we put everything in it. I think we paid. Tradesmen were getting, higher, but it was a nice home and had everything in it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I'm trying to.
Well, then I got. I had a call from Ireland that my mother was dying. She was in the hospital. My sister called me, and if I could make it. So I had the furniture all lined up. The niggers were coming in, and I had everything lined up what I wanted. I wanted the twin beds and my couch, and enough for the 3 rooms. And it went into storage, because I wanted to have that when I come back. And I went downtown that afternoon to get my passport to the immigration place, and I told her my story, and she said, you can't get a passport. I did have one, but it ran out. But she said, seeing what's going on, she said, we'll issue an emergency passport. But she said, you have to go over to the passport office, and I'll get the papers ready, but when you come back, this office will be closed. But we'll let you in, and we'll have everything ready for you. So that's how
And that worked.
I worked, yeah.
And you got back over there.
And then I left, and I had to go. I couldn't get a direct route plane. I had to go to New York and get the plane. And I flew from O'Hare, but they told me out there that they had already contacted with New York, and there was a plane coming in there, and it would be leaving for Ireland, and if you make it on time. But see, they only took the money for the flight from O'Hare. They didn't take the full price. I paid to New York, and then when I got down there, I had to get right away over to the plane and pick up my ticket and pay for it from there. Then I bought a round trip ticket. And we flew to Boston from there. Imagine, sometimes I sit and wonder how I did it. Getting out of my house and all the commotion, and then this thing happened. I wanted to get home. So we flew from New York. I flew from O'Hare to New York, and from New York to Boston. And they stopped again. I don't know where they picked up another group. The plane was packed. And when I got into Dublin, it was on a Sunday and everything was closed. And there was nobody there, because you didn't have the telephone connections, There was nobody there to meet me. And I'm standing, walking around and running around. I'm walking around looking to see. And the girl was working there, and she said, are you waiting for somebody? And I said, I am. But I said, they didn't know what time I was coming. And she said, where are you from? I said, I'm from Moat. Well, it's a long way from Dublin. So anyway, she said, wait a minute, I'll get on the phone. And she got connections across the street from our house at a phone. And my sister came to the phone, and she said, we didn't know we didn't know when you were coming in. So she said, we're getting contact with Dublin. I have all these cousins in Dublin, and they were all at church. So anyway, the next thing you know, when they come out of church, they were over there and they picked me up. They took me over to their house, and I got 2 girl cousins there, and I got three men cousins, and they took me over to their house. We had something to eat, and we took off right away. down for our place, which was 52 miles.
52 miles?
52 miles from Dublin.
52 miles.
Yeah. They're Irish miles. So there's a difference in the miles.
Really?
Yeah.
They're measured different.
Uh-huh.
Is it like based on metric system or?
I don't know what it is, but there's a difference.
Hmm.
So anyway, I had no sleep for 2 or 3 days. And when I got there, they were all ready and all waiting for me. And of course, they all had cars, so we took down for Moat. And when we got there, after all this riding, my brother said, we're going to Athlone, 7 miles. My mother was still alive.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, we're 2 carloads of it went into Athlone to the hospital. The hospital was closed.
Oh.
So when my brother came up to the door, he said to the guy, this is my sister from the States, and she's got to see her mother. He said, I cannot let you in, John. He said, rules and regulations. Everybody's asleep. This place is locked tight. And he said, I can't do it. Well, my other cousin, John, was with him. He came up and took a look at him. He said, we won't make any noise. We just go in and come out. Well, he said, remember, I'm going against the rules. But he said, seeing who it is, crawling, you can come in and just, no noise, wake up the other patient. So we got in to see her. And she was asleep, and we were all there. Of course, they had been there during the day. And I went up and I kissed her and shook hands with her. I said to her, do you know who it is? She said, sure, I know. It's Maisie. They always call me Maisie.
Yeah.
And I said, are you sure? She said, yes, how is Petey and Mary Jane? So we really got in and out of there. And by that time, when we got back to Moat again, it was about midnight. Well, I was so tired I couldn't even sleep. And the house was full of company.
Yeah.
They all were all there because my cousin lived downtown.
So did she live much longer after that?
She lived, I come back here May 1st. She lived about a month.
Mm-hmm.
And we went in every day and visited.
She died of old age?
Old age.
Yeah. She was in her late 80s?
95.
She was 95.
Mm-hmm. 95.
And you told me earlier, but I forgot. She was housewife, worked on work.
Every day she worked. I mean, in the house, she had a big
Mm-hmm.
house. And we had cattle, and she always liked chickens and geese and
Mm-hmm.
ducks. She had all of her. But anyway, she was busy all the time.
Is her house still there?
The house is still there, yes. Just about fallen down. My brother was a big house with 3 bedrooms upstairs. And downstairs there was a kitchen, a dining room, and a living room. And he didn't take care of it.
Is he still
He
living?
let it go to pieces.
Is anyone living there?
The house is there, and he got one of those trailer things,
Yeah.
and they give them to them over there. There are about 6 rooms, and they're free. They give them everything free.
Mm-hmm.
So they offered him, because they didn't want him to live in the house, There was no hot water, there was no heat or anything. They offered him a trailer, a 6-room trailer. He said, if I can put it in my own backyard. Well, they put it in the backyard, right behind the house. It's got a big gate, nobody can come in there. And he's in the back.
What's the address of the house, do you remember?
Huh?
What's the address of the house?
The Gap Moat. That's the only address it ever had.
The Gap Moat.
The Gap. G-A-P Moat.
Huh.
M-O-A-T.
And he lives in the trailer?
He lives in the back there.
Yeah. Does he own the land
He
where
owns everything. I'll be back.
Okay.
And he pays no taxes. Hurry
Yeah.
He followed the trade, you know. Very few people can do that. Some of them have a bunch of kids and they don't do what their parents did.
Yeah. But he still lives there and he still owns a lot of land in Moat.
Moat.
Yeah. Is this my grandfather's watch?
Huh?
This stopwatch here?
That's his watch. I gave it to Peter that was born. He bought that when he came in 1920 when he went to work for the motor coach. It was hanging. I guess he took it off the hook.
It's all packed up like it's going to St. Louis.
It's not going with me. I gave it to your dad.
Well, don't let him forget it, because
1920.
I think that thing's great. That looks. Does it have an inscription or anything that you know of?
This watch was tested every month while he worked for the. See this little hook?
Yeah.
The watch hung on there, but he took it down.
So they would test it every month to make sure it was on time?
While he was working.
Huh.
You could not work for transportation. You can imagine how old that is.
Wow. I've got most of I've got the facts I needed. I'm just trying to think of how to, I love stories. I love stories a lot more than facts. When you think of one person, let me pick a person. Aunt Annie, who I know, who I used to do a pretty good imitation of, in fact. I had her voice down pretty good. If you were going to tell one story about that person, let's just say Aunt Annie, what would that story be?
Aunt Annie, your grandfather was the oldest. And Aunt Molly was after him. Then Aunt Annie came next. Catherine came next. And Gertie. There was a big family there. Mm-hmm. And there was 2 other brothers. The last one just died, Tommy. Patty was out here to visit, and his wife. Mm-hmm. And then there was another brother, Tommy. He just died. Mm-hmm. And I think he was about 83 years old. Of course, they were all born and raised by the seashore. And Aunt Annie worked for the brothers.
Oh, that's right, she did. She worked
That's how you got in there.
At St. Pat's, yeah.
She worked at St. Pat's. She was a cook there. Mm-hmm. And when I think you couldn't have gone in there at that time. Neither could, what's his name? Michael. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I think I told Aunt Annie, she said, what? She said, well, find out about that. Mm-hmm. So, of course, when she went in the next day, she got a hold of the head brother. Mm-hmm. And she said, that's my relative. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I didn't know that. He said, we're kind of filled. But he said, tell him to come back.
Yeah.
I don't know about Michael. Michael didn't do too good there. Well, Michael isn't doing good anywhere. Poor kid, there was something wrong with Michael.
Yeah, I don't remember him being a good student.
It was never bright.
I did pretty good, especially as I got older, I got better in school there.
Well, Michael, the mother was mother had a nervous breakdown.
His mother was who?
Michael's mother. She'd been sick a lot. Funny, I had a picture here of Aunt Annie I ran across, and the school. I was showing it to your dad the other day.
She worked at St. Pat's.
She worked at St. Pat's, and there's a big party up there for her when she retired.
Yeah.
Here she is. That's her.
Yeah. She retired on February 16th, 1987.
Yeah, and I was at the party. They really had a nice turnout, the brothers, the whole thing of it.
And she cooked for them? What was her job there?
She was a cook. Mm-hmm. She fed them. Mm-hmm.
for a long time, right?
Oh yes, she baked bread for them and biscuits, and she really was there a long time. She was there till she died. And Annie was 80 years old.
So she never actually retired?
No, she didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Her husband died pretty young too. He died of cancer. And she had that one son,
Who's her son?
Michael McKeown.
Michael McKeown. Who I cannot picture his face, but
Yeah, so I ran across that and I'm going to give it to Mary Jane. Mary Jane has albums galore.
I've seen them. They're great.
Mm-hmm.
Now my grandfather, your husband, what I hardly knew him because I was so little.
No, he died young.
He was, if you were going to use a couple of adjectives to describe him, what would they be?
He was a very quiet, easygoing man, very kind. He never raised his voice. He never had no trouble. I don't think we ever had a fight.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, we only had your dad and Mary Jane. There were no trouble.
Mm-hmm. Would you consider him, was he interested in the news of the day, or did he read the paper on a regular basis, or did he have any political affiliations or any of that kind of stuff?
No.
No. He was
Home.
family man, union man, worked hard.
He worked.
He never had any, did he ever go on vacation? You guys ever go on vacation?
We used to go in the later years. We'd go up to Wisconsin for a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And he enjoyed the country, water, liked to go out fishing.
I didn't know that. I didn't know he fished.
Where did we go to? Lake Lawn, no, further out. Yeah, Lake Lawn, in Wisconsin. He'd make reservations for a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
We'd go up there. Oh, he gone up there for years. He went up there when he was single. He took his aunt and uncle up there. And he liked it.
Oh, I like Wisconsin too.
Yeah, it was nice.
Well, Grandma, I think I'm kind of tapped out on decent questions here. Is there any stories I'm missing that I should record here?
Well, your grandpa was very easygoing.
I remember the story my father told me about jumping off the garage roof and getting in trouble. Is that true? I mean, how does that story go? I'm trying to remember it.
You mean down on Ohio Street?
Yeah, uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Your dad always had a motorbike.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
But he wasn't a hell-raising child. He was.
No. He was very quiet. So was Mary Jane.
Mm-hmm.
Mary Jane went to St. Mary's. She come near been a nun. Her father talked her out of that. Of course, your dad went the same path, so they were much under control.
Mm-hmm.
But he never was active in anything there.
And he was in the military.
They wanted him to be a runner. He had great legs. But he wasn't interested.
Oh, running is boring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's something else that the kids used to do. But,
Well, I think I've got everything I need here.
well, I hope so.
I've been meaning to do this for years, and I finally remembered to do it.
Well, it's a good thing to know because a lot of people, they can't go back. They don't know anything about their ancestry.
Right, and it drives me crazy.
Yeah,
So.
and you can always back it up.
Right. And I've had any number of people that I wished I had talked to when I had a chance to.
And there's only one left in my family now, it's my brother John.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, he's He never left Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
He used to go to London for a while to see my sister, but he didn't care for London. And of course they don't care for the English anyway.
You know, I was going to ask you one question about your, I mean, I understand the family, the Dean family and the Barrett family, were they active in the IRA, Were you or my grandfather or your family involved in fighting the English?
Involved?
Yeah, I mean, did you,
No.
you weren't involved in any IRA activities?
Oh, we were there at the time. You know, of course my father was too old to be involved,
Mm-hmm.
but they used to. I was growing up at the time, maybe about 13 or 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And like, we had the black and tans to contend with.
Mm-hmm.
We went to bed. We were afraid to go to bed at night. All the light, of course they didn't have any gas light or candle, but there was no lights, and they had shutters. All our windows had shutters, and they were closed tight. And the black and tans had come to the town, and they'd come up to the doors and poke them with the guns. We grew up, we were scared. And they had curfew. You couldn't go out on the street, I think, after 6 o'clock. Because the black and tans, they wonder why they hate England. They were the scum of the earth. They were all prisoners in England. And when this thing broke out, when they wanted to take over, they turned them loose on the people and sent them to Ireland, and they were paying them, what were they paying them? A bob. I don't know if you know what a bob is.
I've heard of it, I don't know how much it is.
Yeah, in England, they're paid by the bob. When they sent them to Ireland, they said they made their pay £1 a day instead of the English bob.
Mm-hmm.
So they turned them loose over there with guns and everything.
What was their job? I mean, what were they supposed to be doing?
Shooting and picking up the orchards. The trouble in the north, it's full of prisoners from that time.
Mm-hmm.
It's still going on, and they'll never settle it.
Mm-hmm.
Because England does not want to get out of there.
Mm-hmm. Why?
And it's
Why do they not want to get out?
well, do they want to get out of any country that we're in?
No, they were
They
pretty
just
much.
get them out of here.
No,
recently.
they left at knife point from pretty much everywhere that they've been.
But
the British Empire.
Belfast is. I've never been in Belfast.
Mm.
We never went down there because they had like curfew and they had guards. In your own country, you can't move around.
Mm-hmm. So you were 13 when all this was going on? 13, 14?
Yes, I was young. And they couldn't get messages. Across the street from us, there was Murphy's. They had a public house. And they belonged to the IRA. And they had a lot of IRA people meet there. They had another gang in Athlone at another place where they corresponded. But they could send nothing through the mail. And if a young man was going, they'd, knock him down. So I become the messenger. Me being the kid I was with the long hair and the big ribbon on it, and
Mm-hmm.
I never knew what I was carrying, but they'd write something and they'd put it on me. One time I had it, my hair was so heavy in between the top of my head, and I had a clam on. I would deliver it. I'd write into Athlone and I delivered the messages.
Was there British checkpoints and black and tan? I mean, could you have been caught easily?
If the black and tans knew about it, they would have killed me.
Yeah.
Nobody knew. Nobody suspected a little girl riding a bike into Athlone.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, everybody on the route knew me.
Mm-hmm.
The route people, they knew.
But the black and tan were just the scum of English society. They were just
Well, the black
prisoners.
and tans were the English bunch.
Mm-hmm.
They shot old people in the country, took them out and put them at the end of the gable of the house and shot them.
Why?
Who knows? Because they were Irish,
Mm-hmm.
and most of them were Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
No, the black and tans was something else. This treaty and this thing that got going on,
Because I've heard about that.
yeah, that's going to get no place.
Why?
Because England does not want to get out of there. And they had Paisley, he's the big troublemaker. I remember when Bride was here, she come here in 1980. She spent a couple of months with me. And we talked about it, and she said, if they would shoot Paisley tomorrow, or whenever they shoot him, that thing would all clear up, there'd be no trouble. But he's no good, and I see he's sitting in on there, he's objecting now to different things, you know, that the agreement they're coming to. And I don't know, do you remember Preston Bradley?
Mm-hmm.
He was a minister, I don't know what, at the People's Church. He was everything. He was Irish, and I think he was born here though. But once a week on Sunday, I used to listen to him before I go to church. He had an hour on. He had a big following, People's Church up on the north side. And he used to go to Ireland every year to visit on the holidays. And I remember when the trouble started, I remember him getting on the air. He said, Ireland, a little peaceful country that I love to visit every year. He said, I can't go there no more. He said, all on account of Paisley. He said, he's no good.
Well, I know so little about Irish politics and the history of all that. It's one of the things. I saw the movie Michael Collins, and
that was under De Valera.
Yeah.
Michael Collins should never have been murdered.
I saw that movie, and that's the most I've ever been
He
exposed to Irish
sent
history.
him on a message that he shouldn't have sent him. He got killed. In 1916 was the uprising in Dublin, Easter week.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big history on that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a song, there's everything, who fears to speak of Easter week. The word alone. Well, I have a cousin in London, and he's an entertainer, Jackie Deegan, and he sings in clubs. So anyway, he was singing in this one place, and somebody said to him, they didn't say to him, he made up his mind he was going to sing the song. And the guy said, the owner of the club said, if you sing it, I'll fire you. He said, I'll sing it anyway.
What song?
Easter week.
That's a song?
Yeah. He said,
Yeah, I've never heard it.
with him. I was going to sing it, and I sang it.
Mm-hmm. And he got fired?
He got fired. He told him ahead of time, if you sing it, see all the English over there.
Around when? When did that happen?
Oh, that must have happened about 20 years back.
Mm-hmm.
Now there.
I know almost nothing about Irish history like that.
Yeah.
Or current politics even. I mean,
Well,
I know my father feels strongly about it.
he keeps up with it.
Yeah, he tries to educate me, and of course.
Yeah, well, he knows what went on. But you have to live through it. I got friends here, there's very few my age left,
Mm-hmm.
you know. They're all dead.
Mm-hmm.
But I had this one I talked to her in particular, and I don't know how many brothers she had, and she said they'd kill them, and they'd bring them up to the door and just throw them at the door, because they belonged to the Irish. IRA.
You know,
'Cause
that'll,
we were only kids at that time. In 19.
so when you came across, when you came over on the ship, you weren't trying to get away
There was
from.
no planes.
Yeah.
It's only recently they're getting in here, which I think was a bad deal. They're coming in here from all over and they're flooding this place out. And they never go back. They come in here as a visitor. And once they get here, they get a job and they don't find them.
Immigrants.
And they don't speak English.
Mm-hmm.
But in them days, when you come in on a ship, it took a long time and it took a lot of, they had a history of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew where they came. They came to New York.
Mm-hmm.
And when they came to New York, they were quarantined there.
Mm-hmm.
And unless they had somebody to pick them up, they didn't get out of there.
And now it's real easy to just come into the
Now,
country.
get on a plane and pay your way, you can go anywhere.
Right.
You don't need a passport, you don't need anything.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
That's how it is.
Well, that's one thing airplanes brought to the world, I guess, is the ability to go anywhere you want, whenever you want,
Uh-huh.
and not answer to anybody.
I remember your dad got a passport already, figures on taking a trip, but I had to have passports to come back and forth, even the last time. And they're good for 10 years.
Yeah, I've got one.
You got one too.
I got one because I went to Canada.
Yeah. Well, they're good to have.
Just for an emergency, at least.
But anyway, no, them days they came in here and nobody knew. And here, you had to have somebody to meet you. They had a farm so big where you were going and who you were going to and what they did and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so forth and so on. And you spoke English. You didn't come in not knowing, what you could speak to people and you could get a job right away.
Well, Grandma, I don't have anything else to ask you, and I'm supposed to go over to John's house. I haven't seen John and Barb yet, so I'm
You're
gonna.
supposed to go to John?
Yeah, I haven't seen him yet. We haven't been able to get together.
Which time you're leaving this evening?
Leaving in about.
Would you like a drink or something?
Yeah, I would. I've been talking a lot. I'm
7-Up or
sure you would
something.
like a drink. Yeah, sure.
A cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or
Well, just a Pepsi or a Coke or some soft drink or something. Whoop, careful. When we shoot these interviews, for television, we always tape down the wire so people don't trip on them.